Welcome to the Missouri Wind and Solar Podcast. I'm your host, Wes Shank, coming to you from our store in Seymour, Missouri. Each week with my co-host and Missouri Wind and Solar's General Manager, David McDarris, we discuss the latest on self-reliant energy. Check out our additional educational information, including dates for our hands-on workshops conducted in Seymour, on our website, windandsolar.com. Thank you for listening to our podcast, and if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing. We're going to talk on this episode for something we really don't talk about that much, and that's because it's even I think a specialty within alternative energy, and that's hydro. And we do sell our motor to be used in hydro applications. We probably sell a good deal of those, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
We wanted to talk about that today for those of you out there who might, have a casual interest in it or something like that, and just kind of talk for a minute about what that entails. And I think by anything you and I have seen, there's a lot more to it than just, I've got a stream.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just have a trickle running out of the side of in Missouri here, especially, we have a lot of what they call weather springs. Weather springs are named exactly like they sound. During the real wet parts of the month, which is usually going to be the spring and the spring thaw, you'll see
it's just a hydrostatic pressure just pushing the water back up.
The water being pushed up out of the ground, and it can pop up anywhere. They may be there 2 years, and then the third year be gone. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah. We're talking about a spring that's tried and true, that's been there for hundreds of years, that's pumping water out of the ground.
And even more specifically, I think probably the first thing we've got to talk about is never assume that you can go capture water.
Right.
Because there are so many regulations about that, and you want to get in trouble with your local DNR, resources group, whatever.
It cannot be basically a
well, no, that's Missouri, right?
Right. In Missouri, it cannot be a marked stream. And when I say that, for instance, I grew up, there was a creek called Indian Creek, and Indian Creek it flowed all the way to the Gasconade River. Well, even though it went through your land and you own the land underneath the water, you do not own the water.
You can own both sides of it, but you didn't own.
And you can, there again, Missouri law states that the gravel underneath the water is yours, but you cannot divert the water. Like say, I want to take this over to a pond and go through a dam, and then, the DNR will be there in just a little bit, and you'll have a huge fine, and then you'll be putting it back where it would belong.
So that's probably the first consideration, and probably the knockout blow for the vast majority. Yeah. And I would say here, why it's easier to do wind. I mean, pretty much if you got access to wind and you can put up a tower, you're good. But the big thing on this is flowing water. And then the next step is you've got to be able to restrict that down as you go along.
Right. You're going to do it one of two ways. If you have a stream coming out of the side of a hill, there's going to be, and there's many flow charts that's going to tell you how much energy is per gallon of water per foot of fall, right? And so really, you got to remember there's always going to be a little bit of not going to be a little bit, there's going to be a loss factor in there. So, and I don't know all the deals. So when I say a number, I'm just making up a number here. So if you had 10 gallons of water at 10 foot of fall, and it said that was equal to the energy of 1,000 joules, which is 1,000 watts of energy. By the time you transform that, you may only be able to get 500 out of that. Now,
the great thing is that it's typically, if you're doing it, it's running all the time.
It's running all the time, yes. You're kind of wasting your time if you're putting it on a stream that's just running intermittently. You probably never get the pay. Even not only do you not get a payoff on it, even if you were using it for an off-grid situation where just when you needed that stream to be producing, it wouldn't be producing. You'd be in a drought. Something would happen, right?
Or if it's too small and it freezes over in the winter,
right?
Or whatever.
Yeah, so there'd be something. But you have that, So at that, after you figure out, hey, I do have enough energy available, it's there. Now I have to figure out how to capture that energy. Am I going to capture that energy with a big water wheel? am I going to use a Pelton wheel where I have to neck down that energy to get a high pressure flow out of the end of the pipe, or am I just going to use the stream's flow on a big water wheel?
Two different things we're really talking about here. I think it's easy just to kind of explain is like a water wheel would be like what you see on a Mississippi River boat. So you've got a paddle wheel out there, and it's sitting in the water, and as the water flows by, it's turning it.
Right.
And I think our buddy on Homestead Rescue, I think he actually did one of those. And the big thing there is, and I know one of the reasons he did that, like that, is that his situation, it was one of those situations where wherever he was working, the DNR there said, you can't have anything permanent on the sides of the river or anything, but you could float a boat out there. And so he put the paddle wheel on a boat, floated it out there, and stuck a motor on there, and as it turned,
and then he set anchor. I mean, he did. He
left an anchor forever.
Right.
Then the other thing that Dave was talking about is a Pelton wheel, and we actually have them here at the store. And this is the kind of device that's used in literally like Hoover Dam.
Right.
I mean, any kind of dam you can think of, any kind of massive hydroelectric production uses this. The component in there is, I think they're typically referred to as spoons. The spoons on the Hoover Dam, you could probably sit a bus on them, but we've got a Pelton wheel here that, it's got spoons on it about the size of a golf ball.
Yeah.
And then we've got the other one that's a little bit bigger.
Spoons about the size of our hand.
And the concept there is, and what David was talking about is, I want to say it's to you pick up the water at one end with, I don't know, what's the pipe you would think up there is an 8-inch pipe or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you'd pick it up with this largest pipe there again, doing your ratio of trying to capture the amount of energy that you're.
But then,
so maybe 8-inch, 10-inch, maybe a 12-inch pipe.
So and then you go to
keep necking down.
Then you go to a 10, and then you go to an 8, and then you go to and you keep. And what happens is that squeezing that water down. And then typically what you would do is you'd have that Pelton wheel set in a box and then come off of that last leg and have 4 nozzles on each corner. I know that sounds corners of a wheel, but basically, the corners of the box, and just firing straight into that wheel, and you're spinning it like mad.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean,
and then of course you've got, then again, now you've got that water that you've got to deal with. You've got to you need to get that water back into the stream.
Right. At that point, I mean, you're directing when the water comes out with those nozzles, you're directing it to hit into the spoons. But to get the water, there's really nothing needed there. It's kind of the bottom of the box is open and has a drain basically that will drain directly back to that stream. So you're not actually doing anything with the water. You're just capturing the energy out of that water as it's passing down the way.
But your challenge is, from what I've seen and looking at this and doing a lot of research on it, is you've got to have some distance for that drop and that necking down to happen. I mean, it's not like you can have, 1 foot at 12 inches and then another foot at 10 and then another. I mean, you're talking about some serious.
Yeah, you have to usually, anywhere from 12 to 15 foot of
I was going to say
drop. And that doesn't mean over the entire length of your property,
And so you're talking about a process to have enough drop on it to create the pressure. And some of the ones that I've looked at is, you may be talking, I don't know, some of them look like 75, 50 feet long.
Right.
That they're running. And then if you think about it, what's the natural thing about a stream or whatever anyway? It's pretty flat.
Right.
So your slope on there is not, Niagara Falls.
You got to think of it like Niagara Falls or like whitewater rafting. I mean, you can come to the Gasconade River in Missouri, where I'm from, and get on there in a kayak, and you can paddle for a long, long ways, and you're going to paddle just about the whole entire way.
It's a nice ride.
It's a nice ride, but you're going to be wore out because you're paddling. Or you can go up into the mountains of Colorado where there's fall, and you can jump in that kayak, and the paddle is just to steer you so you don't run into the rock. Because it's taking you down the river. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that fall. So there again, if your spring is coming out on the side of a hill, like if you're in Missouri or anywhere, and you got hill, that spring is good flowing out of there, then you have drop. I mean, now you can take that pipe down the hill. But if you're just like my mother lives in the bottom of a valley, and she has a little creek that actually runs right in front of her house, and it usually flows 365 days a year, but it's very slow, lazy stream. There's just not enough energy there, you know.
Or you'd have to do that over such a distance.
Yes.
That it becomes.
She really doesn't have enough. I mean, she has
2 miles of PVC pipe.
She's got 40 acres, and there's just not enough. Even at that, there's not enough room to get it. So
now one of the things you got to consider is, I mean, you may be, in a pristine river. That's great. You still got to deal with leaves and that sort of thing. That
right.
I mean. Of course, anybody could say, well, with wind, you've got to deal with
debris,
whatever. But I mean,
it's a lot easier to deal with wind.
If you're making that argument, then you're not making a solid argument, because we know the creeks are going to have more stuff, and you've really got to constantly maintain that and make sure that your pipe is clean and that sort of thing. Keep that up. Let's talk for just a second when we come back about the motors that we would use in that environment, David. Okay, so we offer a lot of different motors here at Missouri Wind. What would we typically recommend in that environment? In
our hydro application, we're always going to use our 12 volt, and you can do that in the single Legacy series, which is a 1600 watt PMG. Or you can do that in our Frontier series, which is going to be dual rotor, dual stator, 2,000 watt PMG. But it is going to be made out of the 12 volt units. Reason being, 12 volt unit has a larger copper winding versus the 48 volt. We need less feet of copper winding for 12 volt that we don't need than we do the 48 volt. But they're still housed in the same housing. So the only way to get that longer length to get that voltage is by making the wire size smaller and then wrapping it more times. So we use the 12 volt there again for the hydro, because, and a lot of people say, well, my system's not 12 volt, it's 48 volt or 24 volt. Remember, the PMG it's not a set deal. It doesn't go to 12 or 14.4 volts and just stop. And then everything after that go to amperage. It's a curve. I mean, so it can start out at 0 volts, and a 12 volt can run up all the way up to 200 volts. So depending on what you're putting that on, and typically you're going to use like an MPPT style controller on a hydro. You're not going to use a diversion controller. You're going to use something like an MPPT or VRD board, and it's going to convert that high voltage it's going to
figure it out.
It's going to figure that out for you. So it's going to bring it back down. And that's all going to be based off of the speed that the actual head is turning on the actual PMG. So at 266 RPMs is where we reach 12 volts. So to reach 48 volt, if we were charging 48, we're going to have to be around 520 RPMs. So you're going to have to design a wheel or a system that will turn at least that capacity. A lot of people, if you're doing a big water wheel, it's just going to be a gear ratio. I mean, you're going to gear that down. You're going to step it down. You may come off. The wheel may turn at, say, 300 RPMs.
So that's
RPMs.
That's a great segue here. So really going from your wheel to whatever is something that's going to be very unique.
Right.
To you, right? I mean,
it's going to be unique to every situation. That's why you can't just go out and say, well, I want to go buy this. If it was, we would just sell the wheels here. We would just have them made and sell them, because it would be a very easy.
There's more to it than,
right.
You got a tower, put it up, the wind blows, we're rocking.
Right.
In this case, you've got it. You've got to design.
You've got to design the wheel for your stream flow that you're trying to, Maybe you don't have the stream flow. Maybe you don't have a real fast flowing stream, so you don't have a lot of drop, but you have a lot of water, right? So you have the potential of having, with a lot of water, you can turn a lot bigger wheel, and have the potential of having a lot more torque, right? If I had 50 gallons of water versus a 5-gallon bucket of water, well, I can turn something with 50 gallons of water putting force down than I can on a 5 gallon. So maybe I can get a lot more torque, but I can only get a RPM of, say, 100 RPMs. But if I have a lot of torque where I can take that to a big wheel, maybe that I can have a 10-to-1 ratio, then I can get 1,000 RPMs out of that small pulley that will be put on the PMG for our hydro.
All right, so I've got a question. I know this comes up a lot. I want to use a sealed motor in the hydro application.
No.
But why?
Number one is heat. I mean, it's just going to overheat.
That's always been such a curious response until you kind of look at that for a minute, and then it makes sense. So the difference in the PMG being up on a tower in the nice, cool
wind,
yeah. And then you think about it being in a stream that's typically down in some type of valley or something, which means there's no moving air. And while the stream may be ice cold, you're not submerging this.
Yeah, this is not a submergible deal. This thing is built. It really needs to be built and housed. It doesn't need to be housed. It's just like our wind turbine. I mean, it's the same motor for a wind turbine, so it doesn't need to be housed in a.
It can get wet,
right? It can get wet, but you can't get it wet to the point of like submerging it under the water. So at that, like when you look at our hydro, it's actually going to have a fan that we're going to have placed on that, turning, pushing air back across those stators to try to keep them cool. Because I know I've said it on here, but I'm saying it again because heat is the destroyer of electricity. I mean, if you're gaining heat, that's some of your energy is being lost through that heat is what is happening. And at that point, actually, it can cause, a lot of damage. The heat can actually cause it to get high enough to get the copper windings where they're going to phase out across each other, short out across each other. So
interestingly enough, as much as you would think that it would be the last thing you'd be concerned about in a hydro application, heat's really probably one of the bigger things.
Yeah, it's actually probably the biggest that we're worried about. I mean, is keeping it cool. There again, if you're up on the tower, I mean, you literally got the wind. If it's turning,
if it's wind, generating, it's cooling.
Yeah,
itself.
It's cooling. I mean, you have a gigantic fan that's actually cooling it at that point. So anyway, yeah, that's definitely what. Well, that's the reason you can't use a seal.
What else have you got about hydro? I think it's very cool. I wish we could do a lot more with it, but it is
just very localized. I mean, just because you go out, say in eastern Missouri or western Missouri and eastern Kansas, and you start seeing the big wind towers, and and your neighbor's got a wind tower. More likely, you can have a wind tower there as well. It's going to work. But you look across there, and your neighbor's got a fast flowing stream across his place, and he's producing all kinds of. And then you look at your place, and it's just a big grass field. You don't have that potential that he had. He was lucky in that essence that he had that. So hydro is very specialized into very small segments of it.
I would even say, from what I have seen, it is much more of an involved, maintenance-heavy.
Right.
I mean, this is something you've really got to monitor it daily. I'm not saying that you don't not monitor your wind turbine or your solar panels daily, but I think this is something you have to be much more actively involved in maintenance.
Definitely. I mean, because we just keep talking about streams. I should have let it be known earlier. You can't place this just in the stream, because if you live anywhere, you're going to have flooding. There is going to be times that you're going to have more water than you currently probably have when you build the system, and sometimes less water, but more water is the real factor there. Flooding. Say that stream that I just talked about that runs right in front of my mother's house. Most of the time, you could jump over it with a good jump. There's other times that it looks like white rider rafting coming down in front of her house. I mean, you could put a canoe in at one end and shoot across her property within a matter of minutes, So if we had a water wheel built there, it would be destroyed. It would just destroy it. Flooding would destroy it. So if you have a stream, there again, one reason Wes immediately started off, you have to be able to divert some of that water from that stream, and so that you can divert enough around to get the energy that you need, but the majority of it's going to go down, and then you're also going to have to be able to shut that diversion off. That way, if that heavy flooding is going to occur, you can shut that off to keep your, So that's why I kept talking about the springs and stuff. Usually they're going to be a constant. They're not going to be, they'll flow maybe a little bit more in the wet times than they do, but it's not going to be a flooding event. It would happen down like in the low valleys.
I would even go back and say, really, everybody that's listening to this, and really just anyone they ought to have some form of solar. It's just really, it's 100%. I think the answer to the question is, should I get solar? Yeah, you should. You should start doing it. Then the next one is, should I do wind? And wind becomes more restrictive. We've got maps set up and we can look at where wind is good. And I've said on the podcast before, we were living in Georgia before, and where we were in Georgia, it's just no. The answer to that would be no. Now, where we live now here in Missouri, the answer is yes, very much so. We need to have wind. So, wind is highly specific, and we'd help you do that. And then on your scale, then your next one is hydro, and the answer there is even more restrictive as far as than what looks at wind. If you're interested in hydro, great. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to see your project. I'd love to get videos and see it. But it is not for the faint of heart.
You're going to have to do a lot of research into the area. If it's just a property you've just obtained, and you really need to have a couple years worth of data to know if it's even going to be worth doing or not.
Okay. Well, I think we're good there. We got it?
Yep.
All right. Well, appreciate you tuning in today, and look forward to bringing you some more podcasts soon. Thank you for downloading and listening to the podcast today. If you have a question you'd like to hear us discuss on the podcast, or just want to say hello, email us at radio@windandsolar.com. As always, check out our store at windandsolar.com and buy some stuff. Your financial support underwrites our educational outreach, like the podcast, YouTube channel, and local STEM collaboration. It also keeps Lucy and her doggy chicken treats. Thanks again for listening.